It was a warm, ordinary evening in Hollow Creek, a sleepy town nestled just outside the bustling city. The kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors waved hello with a smile. The Granger family was the picture of suburban perfection. John Granger, a former government contractor, and his wife Marissa, a quiet woman with a gentle smile, were the proud parents of 2 children. Emily, a bright 16-year-old with dreams of college and a future far beyond the limits of Hollow Creek, and Max, a 12-year-old boy who could always be found with a soccer ball in hand or in front of the TV, watching late-night action flicks. That night, like any other, the family gathered around the dinner table. They talked about their day, laughed at Max's antics, and discussed Emily's upcoming high school prom. For all intents and purposes, it was just another evening in a seemingly happy home. But little did they know, it would be the last time the Grangers would be seen alive. The evening wore on, and by 8 p.m., the Grangers were nowhere to be found. The house was locked up tight, the lights turned off, and the cars were parked in the driveway. To anyone passing by, it looked just like any other quiet home in Hollow Creek. But when a neighbor noticed the odd silence and the fact that the Grangers hadn't been seen outside for hours, a feeling of unease began to creep through the neighborhood. It wasn't until the next morning, when John's co-workers began calling, that someone finally went to the house to check. They found the front door unlocked, but the house was empty. The dinner dishes were still on the table, untouched. The TV was on, but no one was watching. Nothing seemed out of place until the authorities arrived. The police were called, and the investigation into the Granger family's sudden disappearance began immediately. But with no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no ransom note, and no indication of foul play, the case seemed impossible to solve. For days, the police combed the area, searching the nearby woods, checking local businesses, and questioning anyone who might have seen or heard something suspicious. But nothing, no fingerprints, no footprints, no evidence of any kind, gave them a clue. As the days passed, the case grew colder. The Grangers' friends and family were left to wonder. Had they run away? Or had something far darker happened to them? It wasn't until months later that a few odd details began to emerge. Things that might have pointed to something sinister brewing long before the Grangers' disappearance. Marissa Granger had always been a private woman, but in the weeks before they vanished, she made several unsettling comments to friends and neighbors about feeling watched. One neighbor, a close friend of Marissa's, recalled a conversation where Marissa mentioned she felt like someone was following her. "It's nothing, just nerves," she had said, brushing it off. But now those words seemed far more chilling. John, too, had seemed on edge in the weeks leading up to their disappearance. His colleagues reported that he had become distant, distracted. He had recently returned from a business trip abroad, but it wasn't his absence that made people uneasy. It was the way he had acted once he came back. Could the Grangers have been running from something? Or was it something much darker? Then came the reports about the mysterious man. Several neighbors recalled seeing a tall, unmarked black van parked near the Granger house in the days leading up to their disappearance. One neighbor, who lived just a few doors down, claimed to have seen a man standing outside the house late one evening. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, and had a strange, almost cold demeanor. "I didn't think much of it at the time," the neighbor said, "but now it gives me chills to think about it. He was standing there for a good 15 minutes, just watching the house." The man was never identified, and no further information about him surfaced. But the van, silent and dark, seemed to haunt the memory of everyone who saw it. As the investigation continued, something even more disturbing surfaced: John Granger's past. John had worked for a secretive government agency in the years before his family's disappearance. Officially, his job had been classified, but rumors swirled that he had been involved in covert operations for a number of years. These operations were allegedly related to national security, black ops missions, and high-stakes international contracts that no one outside of the agency had ever heard of. Some speculated that the Grangers' disappearance might be linked to John's work, perhaps a government cover-up or retaliation for a past mistake. But the authorities found no solid proof that John's connections had anything to do with the sudden vanishing of his family. Yet, Marissa's earlier comments about feeling watched seemed to suggest that whatever they were running from, it had been lurking just out of sight for much longer than anyone had known. Some believed the Grangers had been targeted by a shadowy organization, while others whispered about dark government secrets and mind manipulation experiments. Theories ranged from alien abductions to involvement in a secret cult. But none of these theories had any concrete evidence to support them. The more time passed, the further the case seemed to slip into the realm of the unbelievable. Yet, every year on the anniversary of their disappearance, something strange happened. Residents reported eerie occurrences around the Granger home. Flickering lights, cold spots, and whispers of a shadowy figure seen walking along the road at night. Was it just the townspeople's imagination? Or was the Granger family's story still unfolding in ways no one could comprehend? It wasn't until 5 years after the Grangers' disappearance that a chilling clue surfaced. A local journalist, who had been following the case since the beginning, uncovered an old, forgotten piece of footage. The video, taken from a nearby security camera, showed a black van parked near the Granger house the night they disappeared. But this time, it wasn't just the van that was captured. A man was seen walking away from the house. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and was carrying something in his hands. Something large and rectangular. The footage was grainy, and the figure's face was obscured. But the sight of the van and the mysterious man sent a wave of fear through the community. Was this the same man seen by the neighbors? Was he involved in the Grangers' disappearance? Or was he merely a bystander? And what had he been carrying? The answers, it seemed, were as elusive as the Grangers themselves. The mystery of the Granger family's disappearance continues to haunt Hollow Creek, and the questions surrounding their vanishing remain unanswered. But one thing is certain. Whatever happened that night, it's far from over, and the chilling truth may never be fully revealed. Years passed, but the investigation into the Grangers' disappearance never truly stopped. A break came when a new detective, Sarah Wentz, took over the case. She had a hunch that the key to solving the mystery lay in the Grangers' past. Wentz discovered a surprising connection between the Granger family and a string of disappearances in other states. All of the missing families seemed to have some link to a now-defunct government program, one that had allegedly tested mind control techniques during the Cold War. The families had vanished under similarly eerie circumstances, and in every case, there were no clues, no witnesses, and no bodies. The deeper Wentz dug into the records, the more it became clear that John Granger's previous work had been connected to this very program. Could the family have been targeted because of John's secret past? Or was there something far more sinister at play, hidden beneath layers of government secrecy? In an unexpected turn, a package arrived at the Hollow Creek Police Department, postmarked from an unknown location. Inside was a dusty old notebook, a journal that belonged to John Granger. The pages contained detailed notes and cryptic messages that made little sense at first glance. However, Sarah Wentz noticed something odd in the journal's final entries. References to a hidden location where something valuable was buried. Something that could explain why the Grangers had been targeted. The message in the journal pointed to a remote cabin deep in the woods. One that the Grangers had apparently visited frequently before their disappearance. But the location was shrouded in secrecy, and Wentz had no idea what she would find once she arrived. Could the cabin hold the answers? Or was it just another dead end? Wentz made her way to the cabin with a few trusted officers, the air thick with suspense as they approached the isolated building. The cabin, abandoned for years, was hidden far from prying eyes, surrounded by overgrown trees and thick underbrush. Inside, the officers found something they hadn't expected. A room that seemed untouched by time, filled with old government files and black and white photos of the Granger family. Most shockingly, there was a large safe embedded in the wall, its combination locked and its contents guarded by a complex security system. After hours of careful work, the team finally cracked the safe. Inside, they found several dossiers containing classified government documents. Documents that detailed secret operations and experiments. Among them was a file marked Project Echo, the same government project linked to mind control tests from the Cold War era. But what caught Wentz's attention was a photograph of John Granger, sitting alongside government officials in front of a black van. Could John have been part of something far darker than anyone had imagined? And was this the true reason his family vanished? The shocking discovery of Project Echo led Wentz to uncover even darker truths. The project had been part of a covert experiment, designed to erase people from society, completely. They were recruited under false pretenses, only to become pawns in a game of manipulation, control, and ultimate disappearance. John Granger had stumbled into something far more dangerous than he realized. He had been working on Phase 5, a secretive operation aimed at erasing individuals who had become liabilities, people who knew too much. John's attempt to distance himself from the project had caused his family to become targets, and it was clear that the government had orchestrated their disappearance. Wentz now knew the Grangers hadn't vanished on their own. They had been erased, but there was more, far more. As she pieced together the timeline, it became clear that John had tried to expose the project before his family was taken. The government had done everything in its power to silence him, and the erasure had gone deeper than anyone knew. A new lead surfaced when an anonymous informant reached out to the police. The informant claimed to have been involved in Project Echo, someone who had been a part of the experiment but was not in on the higher levels of the conspiracy. The informant's name was Kara, and she had been one of the original volunteers for the government's mind control program. She had been recruited as a young woman, under the promise of financial security and a fresh start. But she had quickly realized that she was a part of something terrifying. She had watched as other participants in the project simply disappeared, erased from society without a trace. Kara's story was chilling. She revealed that John Granger had been her contact within the program, someone who had begun questioning the morality of the experiments. She believed John had made plans to expose the entire operation, and the government had made sure his family paid the price. But Kara had fled when she realized the full scope of what was happening, and she now feared for her life. Kara's testimony gave Wentz the final pieces she needed. The van that had been seen near the Granger home, it wasn't just any van. It belonged to the same government agency that had conducted the mind control experiments. The man who had been seen outside the Granger home was identified. He was a high-ranking agent involved in the program, someone who had been sent to ensure that John's family was silenced before they could expose the truth. But there was a twist. The investigation uncovered that John Granger was never meant to be a victim. He had been a whistleblower. He had been working to destroy Project Echo from within. The plan had always been to discredit him and make his disappearance look like a family tragedy. With Kara's help, Wentz managed to find the final piece of the puzzle: a government official who had been directly involved in the operation, Agent Robert Hayes, the man who had orchestrated the Grangers' disappearance. In a tense, high-stakes confrontation, Wentz, armed with all the evidence she had gathered, confronted Agent Robert Hayes in his private office. Hayes tried to cover his tracks, denying any involvement in the Granger family's disappearance. But Wentz had him cornered. She presented the documents, the photos, and the testimony of Kara. Hayes, realizing that the game was up, finally cracked. He confessed to his involvement in orchestrating the Grangers' disappearance and admitted to the dark purpose behind Project Echo. The government had been erasing people for years, those who had become threats to national security or those who had uncovered secrets that couldn't be allowed to see the light of day. But Hayes wasn't the only one responsible. The investigation ultimately led to several high-ranking officials being charged with conspiracy, abuse of power, and crimes against humanity. The Granger family's name was finally cleared. Months later, the Grangers' bodies were found, buried in a remote location that had once been part of the government's secret testing ground. The truth had finally been uncovered. The Granger family's deaths, once thought to be a tragic mystery, were now part of a larger conspiracy that had shaken the nation. The public outcry was immense. Justice was finally served when Agent Robert Hayes and the other conspirators were arrested and tried for their crimes. The Granger family had been victims of a dark and twisted government operation, but now their legacy would live on, uncovered, remembered, and honored by the truth. Wentz's tireless investigation had brought justice to a family lost in the shadows. And while the Grangers were gone, their story would never be forgotten. The case of the Granger family's disappearance would forever be remembered as a chilling reminder of the lengths to which power could go to protect its secrets. But the truth had been revealed, and in the end, justice had prevailed. Stay tuned for more chilling cases on Cold Case Chronicles, where the truth is always darker than fiction. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Cold Case Chronicles. We dive deeper into the most chilling, unsolved mysteries, and together, we uncover what was left behind. Like, share, and leave a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts. Stay vigilant. Stay curious. The truth never rests.